How does it feel to be a failure, daughter? My mother laughed as she said it, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. Her wineglass trembled slightly in her hand, but her smile was steady. Around her, my aunts smiled into their plates. My cousins exchanged amused looks. Dad stared at the roast as if the answer might be carved into it. I felt no anger. That was what frightened me most. For 3 years, I had quietly paid my parents' electricity bills, mortgage payments, insurance, and the credit card my mother used whenever. She wanted something she called necessary. Had never mentioned it, not once. Because I thought helping my family was love. Tonight, apparently, it was proof that I was a failure. I placed my fork beside my plate. Then I looked at my mother and smiled. It feels great, I said softly, especially now that I'm done paying your bills. Her smile disappeared. Dad froze. Then he shouted, "Wait, you've been paying for what?" My name is Claire, and in my family, I was always the dependable daughter, the one who fixed problems quietly and never asked for applause. My older brother Daniel was the favorite. He could make one phone call and my parents would forgive him for anything. When he changed jobs 3 times, Dad called him ambitious. When I built a career from nothing, Mom called me lucky. I learned early that my usefulness was more welcome than my presence. After college, I moved to the city and worked 2 jobs until I could afford my own apartment. I sent money home whenever my parents needed it. At first, it was small things: a utility bill, groceries, a repair. Then came the mortgage, then insurance, then my mother's credit card. Each time she promised it was temporary. Each time I believed her. What she never noticed was that I kept records. Not because I distrusted my parents, because numbers were easier to understand than excuses. For 3 years, I paid every bill through transfers from an account they didn't know existed. I never reminded them. I never complained. I simply watched their lives become easier while mine became quieter. And somewhere along the way, I realized something painful. They hadn't mistaken my silence for kindness. They had mistaken it for weakness. After Dad's question, nobody touched their food. The room seemed suddenly smaller. The chandelier hummed above us, casting pale circles of light across the table. My mother set down her wineglass with unusual care. Then she laughed again, but this time there was no warmth in it. "Oh, please," she said. "She always exaggerates." I watched her fingers tighten around the stem of the glass. Dad looked at me. "What bills?" Mom answered before I could. "Just some things I asked her to help with." "Some things?" I almost smiled. 3 years of mortgage payments, 36 months of electricity, insurance premiums, credit card statements, repairs, groceries when she said money was tight. "Some things." Daniel leaned back in his chair and gave me a doubtful look. "You actually kept paying them?" he asked. His tone wasn't grateful. It was almost amused. I nodded. Mom sighed dramatically. "This is exactly what I mean," she said. "Claire has always needed to feel important." My aunt lowered her eyes. Nobody defended me. I remembered birthdays when my mother introduced Daniel as her success story and introduced me as the responsible one. I remembered family vacations I helped finance, only to hear Mom tell relatives that I was too career-focused to enjoy life. I remembered every quiet transfer, every receipt, every promise. And beneath the table, my phone rested against my knee. The bank app was still open. For the first time, I wasn't looking at what I had paid. I was looking at what I had finally stopped. I didn't decide to stop that night. The decision had happened 2 weeks earlier. I was sitting alone in my car outside the bank, watching rain slide down the windshield, when my phone buzzed with another message from Mom. "The mortgage is due Friday. Please handle it." No greeting. No thank you. Just an expectation. I opened the payment history on my phone and scrolled through 3 years of transactions. The total stopped me. I had paid enough to buy a small house. And yet, that same afternoon, Mom had posted pictures from an expensive dinner, smiling beneath a caption about being blessed. Something inside me finally became still. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt finished. That evening, I transferred nothing. The next morning, I called the bank and removed my account from every recurring payment I had authorized. I canceled the automatic transfers. I saved every statement into a folder. Then I printed the records and placed them in a plain envelope. No threats. No dramatic confrontation. Just evidence. For the first time, I understood that revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it was simply refusing to participate in your own humiliation. When Mom called that Friday, I watched her name glowing on my screen. I let it ring. She called again. Then again. I turned the phone face down and went back to work. 3 days later, she invited the whole family to dinner. That was when I realized she still didn't know. And I decided to let her talk. I didn't plan to embarrass my mother. I planned to make sure she could never rewrite what happened. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee, a laptop, and the folder of statements I had printed. I separated everything into categories: mortgage, utilities, insurance, credit cards, repairs. Then I matched each payment with the messages Mom had sent asking for it. There were hundreds. Some were short. "Can you cover this?" Others were more revealing. "Don't tell Dad, he'll worry." I saved screenshots of everyone. I also contacted my bank and confirmed in writing which recurring payments had been canceled and when. Nothing was left to memory or interpretation. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough about contracts and financial records to understand one important thing. Facts mattered more than accusations. So I made copies. One for me, one for Dad, one for Mom. Then I checked something else. The mortgage wasn't actually in my parents' names alone. 2 years earlier, Mom had convinced me to become a guarantor because she claimed the bank required it. I had signed without reading carefully enough. That changed my plan. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney, brought every document, and asked one question: what can I legally remove myself from? The answer wasn't immediate, but there was a path. It required patience, paperwork, and one final payment. I made that payment only because I wanted my name completely separated from their obligations. After that, I owed them nothing, and they owed me no explanations. Not anymore. Dinner was quiet when Mom finally asked the question. "So," she said, swirling her wine, "are you still struggling financially?" I looked at her. "No." She smiled. "Good. Maybe you'll learn to manage money better." Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I reached into my bag and placed 3 envelopes on the table. One slid toward Dad, one toward Mom. The last I kept. Nobody moved. "What are those?" Dad asked. "Records." Mom's expression changed before she even opened hers. Inside was a printed summary of every payment I had made for them over the previous 3 years. The total was highlighted at the bottom. Dad read it once, then again. His face slowly drained of color. "Claire," Mom pushed the papers away. "You didn't have to do all that." "I know." That answer landed harder than an accusation. She stared at me. I continued calmly. "I also stopped the payments 3 weeks ago." Silence. Then Dad looked at Mom. "You told me she only helped occasionally." Mom said nothing. "And the mortgage?" he asked. I placed the final document on the table. "My name is no longer attached to it." Dad leaned back. For the first time that evening, nobody was laughing. Mom's eyes lifted toward mine. "You would really leave us like this?" I held her gaze. "No." I stood and picked up my coat. "I already left." Then I walked out. Behind me, I heard Dad ask the question she had spent years avoiding. "How much did our daughter pay?" The family dinner ended without dessert. By the time I reached my car, my phone had already started buzzing. Dad called first. I didn't answer. Then came a message. I had no idea. I believed him. That mattered more than I expected. Later that night, my aunt called. Her voice was softer than usual. She told me she remembered all the times Mom had criticized me for being too independent. "I understand now," she whispered. I thanked her, but I didn't feel victorious. Victory would have meant someone losing. What I had wanted was simpler. I wanted the truth to stop being negotiable. Over the next few weeks, things changed quietly. Dad opened his own bank account. He started reviewing the household finances himself. Daniel stopped making jokes about my career. He even apologized, though awkwardly, for laughing that night. My mother didn't apologize. Instead, she became distant. At first, that hurt. Then I realized how much of my relationship with her had depended on me, constantly proving that I was useful. Without the bills, there was very little left for her to demand from me. That realization was painful but freeing. Some relationships survive honesty. Others only survive silence. I learned the difference. And maybe that's why this story matters. Not because I stopped paying someone's bills. Because I finally understood that love isn't supposed to require you to disappear. If someone only values you while you're useful, Walking away can feel like losing them. Sometimes it's actually the first time you've chosen yourself. 6 months later, I still think about that dinner. Not because my mother called me a failure, because I finally stopped needing her to call me anything else. My life changed in small ways first. I opened a savings account and watched the balance grow instead of disappear into someone else's emergencies. I took a vacation without checking my phone every hour. I bought furniture for my apartment because I liked it, not because I was saving every dollar for the next bill. Dad and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. We talked more honestly now. Sometimes we had coffee without discussing money at all. Mom and I remained distant. She eventually sent me a message asking if we could move past everything. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, I don't want to move past it. I want to learn from it. She never answered. And strangely, I was okay with that. I used to believe revenge meant making someone feel the pain they caused you. Now I think the quieter kind is different. It's becoming someone who no longer needs their approval. I didn't ruin my mother's life. I simply stopped financing the version of her life that depended on my silence. She had called me a failure in front of everyone. Months later, I understood the irony. The greatest thing I ever failed at was becoming the daughter she wanted. And the greatest success of my life was finally becoming myself.